Bihar, a state rich in history and culture, had faced significant psycho-political challenges that have shaped its journey. Terms like Jungle Raj often dominate the narrative, but what lies beyond these labels? Today, we have explored the expertise and of governments and unfulfilled promises, potential for change in Bihar's future. Good morning, everyone, and a good afternoon, everyone. With the pride of having a galaxy of empowered people with us today in Orange City, this is Charanpreet Kaur, delighted and privileged to welcome you all to this sixth edition of Orange City Literature Festival organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with Raisoni Education. Today, we have with us Mr. Mrityunjay Sharma. A huge round of applause for sir. He is a first generation politician, entrepreneur, and author of a current bestseller, Broken Promises, Caste, Crime, and Politics in Bihar. An engineering graduate from BIT Ranchi and an MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. He worked in a various senior HR roles in Asian Paints before moving to the hinterland of Chhattisgarh, where he worked with Chief Minister Dr. Raman Singh on developing issue. He subsequently moved to his home state of Jharkhand to join politics and worked at the grassroots. He is currently the conveyor election manager for BJP Jharkhand. I welcome you, sir, to this OCLF. Also, we have today's moderator, Mr. Naveen Choudhary. A huge round of applause for him. He is a popular Hindi writer known for his best-selling novels Janta Story and De Chal, a keen observer of politics and society. His writing often reflects his sharp insight. With an MBA in marketing, Naveen sir has also held key roles as prestigious organizations like Aditya Birla Group and Oxford University Press. Before leaving this corporate career in 2021 to focus on writing, he is also a public speaker and conduct workshops on personality development, public speaking, and social media management. As the topic for today is Unraveling the Jungle Raj and the Broken Promises of Bihar Socio-Political Landscape. I know topic itself is very captivating, but we have to be in a time frame of 40 minutes. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
40 minutes from now?
Yes. Thank you.
So we have a lot of pride about our state because of the history. बुद्ध वहां हुए, सीता वहां थी, महावीर. तो आप देखें नालंदा विश्वविद्यालय यहाँ था. So education, religion, spirituality, a lot of things which happened in Bihar, and from there it moved to Jungle Raj. Being from Bihar became an abuse. Kya bhai Bihari hai kya? This is what happened. And then things changed again. When we talk about UPSC exams, then you're going Bihari hi wahan aate hain. So what is actually happening? कि बिहारी इतने टैलेंटेड हैं, बिहार जिसने अपने आप को हिस्ट्री बिहार की इतनी रिच है, वो कहां पर कैसे गया, इसकी हम बात तो करेंगे इस बुक के थ्रू, जिसको कि मृत्युंजय ने बहुत अच्छा इस बुक के अंदर किया है. लेकिन उससे पहले थोड़ी सी हम इनकी हिस्ट्री जानते हैं, क्योंकि एचआर से ऑथर एंड पॉलिटिक्स, ये जर्नी कहां से हुई कॉर्पोरेट से पॉलिटिक्स में आने की, थोड़ा सा इसके बारे में आप बताइए.
So I come from a very typical middle class family. I was born and raised in a place called Rajrappa, that happens to be a very famous temple town around 60 kilometers from Ranchi. And as a very typical middle class kid, the only thing that we knew of back then was to do either engineering or medical. And I chose engineering. And then after engineering, we had to top it up with an MBA. So I did an MBA. And then we had to do a job. That is what all middle class parents and all middle class kids want in their lives. And so I joined Asian Paints as as one of their HR guys. I worked there for 5 years, but what I realized is, and working there for 5 years gave me some financial bandwidth. So I think I broke that needs wala stratosphere, and I had that financial weight that I could do something if I wanted it. It was not about bread and butter anymore, as our parents had to do. And then I thought that this is enough of corporate, and not something that I'm contributing too much. It felt like anybody could come and do my job, so I felt utterly useless there, to be honest. And it is then that I saw this opportunity wherein the government of Chhattisgarh was looking for people to join in an advisory role to the then CM of Chhattisgarh, Dr. Raman Singh. I said, let's take it up as an experiment. I would at least get to learn a lot of things. It is a completely new sector. I do not have any exposure to this. So maybe I learn things. And if things go downside and it gets worse, I can come back to corporate any given day. So that is that one step that I took that changed my life. I went to Chhattisgarh. I had never been to Chhattisgarh earlier. I worked there for a year almost on government policies, on-ground initiatives, very grassroots work. And I loved the work. I really loved what I was doing. The impact was great. I used to sleep with a very satisfaction every day. But life had some other plans. In 2018 December, the elections happened in Chhattisgarh, and Dr. Raman Singh lost the elections, and Congress came to power. And as it happens in India, any government which comes into power, they do not like anything that the previous government has done, and they do not like even their appointees. So they asked us to leave and said, we had enough of you. We do not want you now. So I was then again in a state of fix as to what to be done now. Do I go back to corporate or do I do something different? It felt like if I go back to corporate, I'll be dissatisfied my entire life as to what I'm doing. So I did not want to do that. And after a month or couple of introspection, I thought, and what I'd realized during that stay in Chhattisgarh is there are broadly two parts to what happens on the ground. One is the politics or politicians who shape the narrative or who pick up the policies and who say what will be done on the ground, and the bureaucracy which gets it implemented on the ground. While the bureaucracy may look as very, very powerful from afar, I've seen bureaucracy to be very helpless at times. So they just can do what needs to be done in the most efficient manner, but they can never set the narrative. The narrative is always set by the politics and the politicians. And there I thought that I had enough of bureaucracy. Now let's get into politics. And it is then that I decided to come back to my home state of Jharkhand and join politics. And the last 5 years has been a very bumpy ride. But yeah, I at least like what I'm doing, and I would want to do it. Yeah.
So I'm sure we would like educated politicians like you in our states. Now coming back to Bihar. एक बिहार बदनाम है कास्टिज्म के लिए. हमेशा जब बात होती है कास्टिज्म की बहुत बात होती है, बट बिहार इज द स्टेट जहां सबसे पहले सोशल जस्टिस की बातचीत शुरू हुई. 60s के टाइम से आप देखेंगे बिहार की पॉलिटिक्स चेंज होनी शुरू हुई थी और सोशलिस्ट लीडर्स जो है वहां पर पावर में आने शुरू हुए, और एक पूरा दौर आया जहां पर कि सरकारें बहुत थोड़े टाइम के लिए बनती थी, गिरती थी. और 90 के बाद लालू प्रसाद यादव आए. उनका भी जो पूरा का पूरा आइडिया था वो यही था कि सोशलिज्म की बात कर रहे हैं. सामाजिक न्याय वाज द टर्म जिसकी वो बात करते थे. मैं ये समझना चाह रहा हूँ कि जो पूरा पीरियड था इसमें बिहार जितना बदनाम था, वहीं जातिवाद की बात बाकी हर स्टेट में रही है, लेकिन ये सामाजिक न्याय इतना उभार में कैसा है कि पॉलिटिकली जो है पार्टीज जिनका सोशलिज्म का आइडिया था वो बहुत तेजी से उभर के आई और सत्ता में आती रही.
See, what happened in the 1960s and 70s is, so inequality has always been there in Indian society. Inequality in terms of the caste, and the caste has also become very synonymous with class. So it is, when you see the various trait of castes, as we say, when you correlate it with their economic prosperity, there has always been an inequality. What happened in the 1960s and 70s, that there's a consciousness which started coming, specifically in the OBC caste, as we say, the other backward castes. which said that we are so huge in numbers, but we are not being represented properly either in jobs or politics, government, or even economic opportunities. And we must fight for our opportunities. And one of the first most important leaders which started speaking of this was Lohia. I don't know how many of you know about Lohia. He is a very, So in the 60s, Lohia started speaking of it. And Lohias gave slogans like, जिसकी जितनी हिस्सेदारी उसकी उतनी भागीदारी, पिछड़े पाएं 100 में 60. 60 is basically, they said, since we are at least 60% of the population, so we should get 60% of the resources. Now this consciousness started coming in these castes. Now this movement started spreading largely in the Hindi heartland. Lohia came from UP, and then, the total revolution of the 1975 happened, which is Jayaprakash Narayan led it. The epicenter was Bihar. And a lot of socialist leaders who idolized Jayaprakash Narayan came to the forefront because of this entire movement of total revolution or Sampurn Kranti, and included leaders like Lalu Prasad Yadav, Nitish Kumar, Ram Vilas Paswan, Sharad Yadav, a host of socialist leaders of today, Mulayam Singh Yadav, and so on. And that then the assertion then started increasing with the increasing awareness, with the increasing transparency, with the increasing information. The assertion kept on increasing, right? And with the awakening in terms of political awakenings also, people also started voting for, these parties. So for the first time in 1967, the socialist parties were able to form government in Bihar. Right? It was the first time that a non-Congress-led government was formed in one of the states. And then their strength also started getting increasing, right? By the 1980s, right, this awareness has increased to a certain level. And the 1990 was a turning point, I would say, because the Mandal Commission came in, and the VP Singh government, they recommended for 27% reservation for OBCs in government jobs. And from there, the entire assertion came to a second level, because it was also resisted by a certain section of the society. So friction came in between the two sections, between the so-called haves and have-nots. And that was then utilized by politicians also, in not a very ideal scenario, I would say. So politicians also, some of the politicians, so for example, Lalu Prasad Yadav from Bihar, he thought that this was a very good opportunity. So he said that let's speak for this section and become a hero of this, right? So instead of reconciliating between these two warring groups, saying that, talking to both sides, making them understand why is this necessary, and helping them reconcile the difference, he tried to increase that gap and wedge that. Instead of wedging that difference, he tries to widen the difference. He started speaking against those who were resisting the reservations, and so the OBC caste took them as their heroes, right, and became their consolidated vote bank. Right. Similar things happened with Mulayam Singh Yadav in Uttar Pradesh. So I think, while caste had always been there, the caste differences have always been there. Some amount of acrimonies have always been there. It is the 1990s which took it to another level, specifically in the Hindi heartland. And there's in fact, I quoted in my book that there's a reason why you would see that even the Mandal agitations were primarily concentrated in the northern states. The Mandal agitations were almost absent in the southern states. There were rarely anybody burning themselves on fire in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka and so on. And the primary reason that looks like is that, one, the entire dependence on government jobs is much higher in the northern states than the southern states. The southern states generally have a very flourishing private sector as well. Since the dependency on the government sector is low, hence the entire fight for government jobs is much less in the southern states, and hence in the northern states is a matter of life and death. Getting a government job, when you are giving it to reservations, then people revolted. Second, the south somehow. Second, in south, you would see the proportion or the population of the upper caste is also sub 10%. right? Which is slightly higher in the northern states. So that also becomes a reason why it was more concentrated in the northern states. And the third, the southern states over the years in the 20th century, they had a history of somehow, a lot of movements against caste, in fact, and a lot of movements against, such acrimonies and such divisions, and I would say caste reforms, and that had somehow started leveling those fields between, or the gap between these castes, and hence, I would say it primarily remained concentrated in the northern states. The caste will always be there. It is, I think, a lot of what caste differences that we see is also that gets, accentuated by politics and politicians, because caste is a very important tool for identity politics. A lot of politicians and candidates who fight elections fight it in the name of a certain caste, right? A lot of political parties which fight election fight it in the name of certain castes, that we are a party which primarily represent these castes. And that, I think, accentuates this division and this, and it keeps going. Yeah.
So there is one thing very interesting in this book about Lalu Prasad Yadav. His nara was Vikas nahi Samman chahiye. That was to divide on the caste basis. उसका अपने ग्रुप को ये नारा था कि विकास नहीं सम्मान चाहिए. If someone is asking for a road, his logic was कि उस पे तो अपर कास्ट वाला गाड़ी लेके चलेगा, तुम्हारे पास तो गाड़ी नहीं है, so why do you need a road? So क्या कास्टिज्म इस हद तक अंदर घुसा हुआ है? आपने नॉर्थ वर्सेस साउथ की बात की कि लोगों को डेवलपमेंट नहीं चाहिए था, स्कूल नहीं चाहिए था, सड़क नहीं चाहिए थी, एंड दे वर हैप्पी विद जस्ट दिस थिंग कि ठीक है हमारी कास्ट का एक आदमी सीएम बन गया है.
That's a so people are more comfortable with English or Hindi? This became a democracy then. See, it's a very difficult. So people, we generally think that what every voter would want, they would want development. Right? It's a very commonsensical thought कि यार लोगों को बिजली पानी सड़क यही तो चाहिए होता है, तो लोगों को इसके लिए वोट करना चाहिए. Does not work that way, because we as human beings are not creatures of logic. We are creatures of emotion. Right? So many a times our emotion overtakes our logic. Right? Now that happens very often in politics. You vote for a certain politician because you like them. You don't know why you like them, you just like them. He speaks well. दिखने में अच्छा लगता है वो. Smart है बंदा. And you dislike a certain politician because of some weird reason. Right? यार ये क्या बकवास बोलता है, या ये थोड़ा अजीब है, I don't like him. Right? You'll not be able to even explain that. Now, that's in very simpler terms. Now, when you extrapolate it to very emotional kind of arguments, wherein somebody is talking to you, कि तुम्हें सड़क चाहिए या अपनी इज्जत चाहिए, now it becomes very difficult for you to choose. You'll say, why can't I have both? Right? But then, again, it is emotions. So they keep telling you, पहले कौन सा चाहिए? तो some of you will say, नहीं पहले सड़क दे दीजिए. Some of you will say, नहीं पहले इज्जत दे दीजिए. Right? Now, politicians will, of course, play on this. They'll play on their strengths. Right? So, in the 1990s, when Lalu came to power, he realized that development is a very long-term exercise. Nowadays, you might see roads getting made within 2 years or 3 years. Earlier, for even a certain road to be made, it would take 5 years, 10 years. Right? So let's say certain chief minister Lalu came to power. Now he's getting a highway made. He's getting a power plant constructed or a railway station constructed. वो जब तक construct नहीं होगा तब तक next elections आ जाएगा. Right? So कुछ दिखाने के लिए फिर कुछ चाहिए. Now I would argue that जो proper statesman होगा, he would still stick to this principle and say, what is good for the people, I'll do that. But not all politicians are statesmen. That's also a fact. They think for their own benefits and to be in power. Now, Lalu realized within the first couple of years itself that people are more inclined towards, rhetorical things or emotional things or identity politics. Nobody understands development. And these days, at least you have social media and those kind of things. At least you compare infrastructure and so on. In the 90s in Bihar, half the people hadn't seen roads even. So what would they ask for? They did not know what electricity looked like. So they did not even know that they needed it. Right? And hence, Lalu started playing more on the emotional sides, sides. And the first, as we said, the first point was the Mandal Commission itself. And he saw that possibility in the Mandal Commission agitations. He saw all the backward castes consolidating behind him. So he thought this is a good issue. And there could be similar issues. Right? So let's play on that. And you do not need the votes of 100% of people to win elections. You need the votes of maximum 30-40% of the people. So let's try and create a social coalition which will definitely vote for me in any condition. So Lalu came from the Yadav's caste. So first he started pandering to that caste. So that was broadly that this caste will remain with me. Now Lalu said, I need some other groups also. So Lalu said Muslims could be one another group. And the entire Ram Mandir agitation during the 1990s and Lalu stopping the Rath of Advani was not because he had this higher principle of secularism or something. Because he thought that this step will make all the Muslims rally behind him. And hence he would have that consolidated vote bank which would then always vote for him. That will become loyal to him. Right? And that's how he played. And hence, he then completely moved away from the development politics. And, as you rightly said, he had such weird statements that in today's world, you would not believe a chief minister would have said. He would literally say, कि सड़क क्यों चाहिए? गाड़ी है क्या तुम्हारे पास? वो गाड़ी तो फिर सब अपर कास्ट वाले या बड़े पैसे वाले चढ़ा और तुम्हारे बच्चे खेलते रहेंगे सड़क पे उस पे चढ़ा के चले जाएंगे. These were his arguments. So I think he was a master politician. So you'll have to give it to him. And he played the people of Bihar in that way for 15 years.
So the book talk about in first few months, he was very successful. He did many good things. Law and order was improved. Even Central Home Minister, he praised him. So many good things happened. He started Janta Darbar. He was working for people. Auction, which is something synonym to corruption, I would say. So he removed that system and he tried to give benefits to the poor. So definitely there was something which was called development. He was actually working on that side. And then suddenly we see he moved from there to Bhura Bal Saaf Karo. And Bhura Bal, when he said, that was for the upper caste, which we call in the social system. So Bhura Bal Saaf Karo. Now there comes a question of ideology. So he comes from an ideology which is called socialism. राम मनोहर लोहिया की उन्होंने बात की, जेपी के आंदोलन से बड़े हुए हैं. So is this a problem of Lalu Prasad Yadav, or this was a problem of ideology which wanted that kind of divide in the society? Because he had that option. He had very much option कि जो काम शुरू किया है डेवलपमेंट का, उस काम को आगे बढ़ने दिया जाए. Development will happen and definitely he can give them that samman also. So what is the issue? Where he went from there to Bhura Bal Saaf Karo?
So see, socialism talks about giving the rights to the have-nots, but it does not talk about eliminating the haves. Right? So it does not say that to give the rights to the have-nots, you have to, eliminate all the people who have resources. And in fact, this has been proven by the other people who have followed socialism. So for example, before Lalu Prasad Yadav, Bihar had a very great socialist leader called Karpuri Thakur. In fact, who was just awarded with Bharat Ratna posthumously. Karpuri Thakur became the chief minister of Bihar in 1977. And he talked about reservation in Bihar in 1978. 1978, there was no mention of Mandal Commission or reservation to the OBCs and so on. So it was such an alien concept in 1978 to be speaking of reservations. And you can understand the kind of resistance he would have faced from the upper castes. The resistance was extreme, but still, Karpuri Thakur did not try to agitate the upper caste and let's say, or eliminate them. He in fact tried to reconcile between the two. He discussed the necessity of that reservation. He he tried to assuage the fears of all the sections, and he tried to have a very conciliatory approach. That was Karpuri Thakur for you, who we can call as the entire father of this Mandal Commission. Even the commission did not even think of that. Mandal Commission took, recommendations from that, in fact. And his formula was called Karpuri formula. It was very beautiful in a way that Karpuri Thakur, and if some of you understand the technicalities, the Mandal Commission gave reservation to the entire OBCs, saying 27% of the seats will be reserved for all OBC castes. Now, OBC castes have almost 100 castes in the central list. Now, within the OBCs also, certain castes are more prosperous than other castes. So what happens generally is a larger section of the 27% is appropriated by the castes which are already prosperous in the OBC castes. Right? So what Karpuri Thakur said, he said, this entire OBC group is not a very homogeneous group. Let's classify it between OBCs and EBCs, other backward castes and extremely backward castes. And let's have sub-quota for these two sections separately, so that everybody can have the benefits of reservation. This he did in 1978. Just think of it. And it was then implemented by Nitish Kumar when he came to power after 2005. So such was his foresightedness. He also was a socialist. Next, Nitish Kumar is also a socialist. He implemented the OBC-EBC bifurcation. He implemented reservation for women in panchayats. He never took the line what Lalu took. So to give something to one section, you do not have to abuse or, eliminate the other section of society. So no, it's not the problem with socialism. It's the problem with the person who's taking that approach.
Because there was one more thing, caste armies which became. So Ranveer Sena, they are known for massacres, and it was upper caste army. And it was in retaliation of Naxalites. So there was a very interesting thing. Naxalites used to actually capture the land. वो लाल रंग का झंडा लगा देंगे आपके खेत पे आकर, and then this is going to be my land. If you are opposing, they are going to kill you. And then Ranveer Sena retaliated. So both of the things are not right. Of course, you cannot kill someone, and of course you cannot capture the land. But at that time, police and judiciary was also not helping those जिनका जमीन कैप्चर हो रहा है. So how police and judiciary was working, and how much Lalu was responsible for the rise of these caste armies in Bihar?
See, just to see how much Lalu was instrumental in the rise of these private caste armies, you can just compare it with similar other states.
I will add on one more thing into that. So in addition to caste army, there was another industry that was kidnapping industry. One of its in the world. So that also developed during Lalu's Raj, and many ministers or MLAs associated with him, they were actually running that thing. So that all I wanted to understand Lalu Prasad's perspective, how judiciary, police, everything, they actually helped caste armies or Naxalites at the same time the crime, which we call Jungle Raj. Yeah.
So see, caste armies is a very, very 1990s phenomena in Bihar, right? So what happened in the 1990s is the caste acrimonies went to an altogether different level. To a level wherein the one caste would not want to see the other caste. And it would be like they're sworn enemies just because they come from different castes. Now the same caste divisions were also present in similar other states. In UP also, in Madhya Pradesh also, but they did not have caste armies. There, no massacres on the lines of caste happened. It happened only in Bihar. And a prime reason I accrued this to is Lalu's reign. And why I say this? Because when the state starts taking one side, people will resort to their own mechanisms to, fight the other side. So what happened in the 1990s, a lot of Naxalite groups, by the late 80s, in fact, a lot of Naxalite groups, they started, as you rightly said, so they started with the very right reasons. In fact, when the Naxalite group started, they started with asserting the rights of the Dalits. They said that they have to be given the basic level of respect. They have to be given the wages they deserve, right? They have to be given the basic so they can go to a police station or file an FIR, those kind of things, state services as we call it. They deserve it and they should have it. But by the 1980s and 1990s, this went further and further to, as you rightly said, appropriating lands. वो लाल झंडा लगा देंगे और अब ये जमीन हमारा है, right? Now, when this started happening, what the state should do is the state should say, I'll take a neutral view and I'll work according to the law. Whatever law prescribes, I'll follow it. And anybody who's going out of the line, I'll punish them, right? That did not happen. There was an implicit support of Lalu for these left groups. So what happened is the other caste groups, specifically the upper caste groups, they formed their own armies. They said, if the state is not going to protect me, we'll have to form our own groups. So all castes in Bihar, the upper caste and middle caste as we call it, the upper OBCs, all of them, they had their own armies. So the Bhumihas had a Ranveer Sena, the Rajputs had a Sunlight Sena, the Yadavs had a Lorik Sena, the Kurmis had a Bhumi Sena. Everybody had their own armies. And these were not small armies. And I quoted in the book, at its peak, the Ranveer Sena, which is one of the largest among them, had 17,000 arms at their disposal at its peak. So just think, an extra state body having thousands of arms at their disposal can be how chaotic, right? And then this caste was started wherein, it started with one murder here, one murder there, and it became to an extent wherein the left groups, and specifically MCC among them, they started attacking the villages of upper castes, landlords and upper caste villages at night, and they would eliminate, they would ask people their caste, they would collect all the men in those villages, they would take them to a nearby canal, they would tie their hands and legs and slit their throats. The first such massacre happened in a village called Bara in Gaya. 35 upper caste men their throats were slit on the sides of a canal at night. Then the Ranveer Sena retaliated. They attacked the so-called Dalit villages. They killed people in 30s and 40s and 50s of numbers. And such massacres kept on going till 2000. And 1992, when the Bara massacre till 2000, there were 59 such massacres in the state of Bihar. 59. Wherein this entire men in a village would be killed on a certain night by people from the other side who would have surrounded the village, and killed them. And almost 600 men were, from both sides, they killed. And the state was a mute spectator. And the state was a mute spectator because the state benefited from it. Because they benefited from the division. If a division would not exist, a certain people would not come to your side to vote for you. And in fact, very funnily, there are instances that I quote in the book. So in the year 1999, there's a massacre which happens on the 25th of January night. President K.R. Narayanan was delivering the pre-Republic Day message, as the President of India does on every Republic Day, on the eve of Republic Day. And on the same night, a massacre in Jahanabad happens. Jahanabad was one of the worst affected areas. And 23 people are killed. And he calls it a national shame. And then 10 days later, another massacre happens in a village called Sankarbhiga, just 10 kilometers away from the same site. Again, 12 people are killed. And then the Vajpayee government says this is a failure of the law and order. The law and order has failed in the state. And they impose president's rule in that state, saying the state is not able to take care of its own citizens. What happens very funnily is that the Congress is also a coalition partner to RJD in Bihar. And it fails to, and it refuses to support the bill in parliament. And Vajpayee government did not have the majority to pass that bill. So, and Rabdi Devi was the chief minister, then Lalu Prasad Yadav's wife. So Rabdi Devi gets reinstated as the state's chief minister. And very ironically, a massacre happens just a week after she gets reinstated again. And this time it happens in upper caste village. The Bhumihars are killed. And when Rabri Devi is then asked by a reporter that would you go to that village, a massacre has happened there. And she says, why should I go to that village? Those caste men are not my voters. Right? So such is the role of the state that, and I think it is only attributable to that, because if only the caste was the reason for such kind of massacres, it should have happened elsewhere as well in India. It did not happen anywhere else.
Do you think media also played a role into that? So when Lalu Prasad, at one side they were saying Jungle Raj hai. At the same time, they were also presenting Lalu Prasad Yadav as a hero. His mimicry, his fun-loving things, जो भी वो theatrics करता है, that everything was becoming highlights of media. So do you think media also played a role? They somewhere indirectly supported that kind of thing, Lalu Prasad's regime.
So, see, what happens is Lalu tried to make development and social justice as binary. कि social justice मिलेगा तो development नहीं मिलेगा, development मिलेगा तो social justice नहीं मिलेगा, तो तुम चुन लो. Which is not the truth. It can always come together. In fact, Nitish Kumar did it in his first term. He brought in massive development to Bihar and brought in wonderful social justice. So when Lalu made it a either or, the media, I would say, though it highlighted whatever injustices were being done, I think in certain sections of the media, they crowned him as the prince or the harbinger of social justice, which in hindsight, if you see, right, which in hindsight, if you see, was not really the case. So there have been arguments which you will see in media, a phrase that is often said of Lalu, कि लालू ने पिछड़ों को आवाज दिया, और कुछ तो नहीं दिया लेकिन आवाज दिया. I see that as a faulty argument, and I'll quote it data wise also. See, आवाज आप जब देते हैं लोगों को, तो साथ ही साथ सड़क बिजली पानी भी दे सकते हैं ना. अगर आपका फायदा कराने का ही एम था तो दोनों दे दीजिए. एक तो जरूरी नहीं कि सिर्फ आवाज देके छोड़ दीजिए. नो, आवाज देने के भी 10 तरीके होते हैं. वन इज, आई टेल यू कि ये तुम्हारा दुश्मन है, तुम तभी आगे निकल सकते हो. So he would put them in fight with each other. So Lalu would say कि तुम्हारे गांव में कोई अपर कास्ट वाले का जो बिल्डिंग है ना, उससे ऊपर घर बनाना. But he would not talk about social reform policies, which could have been more long-lasting, more impactful. To the tune that जब राबड़ी देवी चीफ मिनिस्टर बनी, एंड राबड़ी देवी को आप लोग पता नहीं उस समय, आई डोंट नो योर एजेस, सो राबड़ी देवी वाज द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस इन द हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया वेयरइन इट वाज अ सरप्राइज टू ऑल ऑफ अस दैट ऑन अ सर्टेन डे लालू वाज इम्प्लिकेटेड इन फॉर्डर स्कैम. ही वाज अरेस्टेड और उनको जेल जाना पड़ा. तो बहुत हुआ कि अब नेक्स्ट चीफ मिनिस्टर कौन होगा बिहार का. तो लालू की वाइफ राबड़ी देवी, शी इज अनलेटर्ड, मतलब वो पढ़ लिख नहीं सकती है, तो कोई उनका नाम भी नहीं जानता था. और अचानक दूसरे दिन हम सबने न्यूज़पेपर्स में देखा कि बिहार की नई मुख्यमंत्री है राबड़ी देवी. उनको किसी ने देखा भी नहीं था. वो एंड आई राइट दिस कॉन्वर्सेशन इन अ बुक कि लालू ने जाके राबड़ी को किचन में कहा कि कल से तुम मुख्यमंत्री हो. तो राबड़ी रोने लगी, बोली हम कैसे मुख्यमंत्री बनेंगे, हम तो किचन का काम जानते हैं, हम बाहर आज तक निकले नहीं घर से. बोले कोई नहीं, तुम ही बनोगे मुख्यमंत्री, कल से तुम मुख्यमंत्री हो. To the tune that राबड़ी could not speak, so प्रेस वालों को जवाब देने के लिए कोई दूसरा व्यक्ति होता था. इनफैक्ट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली में एक दूसरे व्यक्ति को डिप्यूट किया गया कि सीएम से जो भी सवाल किए जाएंगे वो आंसर देंगे, क्योंकि सीएम आंसर नहीं दे सकते. और फिर 2-4 महीने हुए तो राबड़ी को सिखाया गया कि 2-3 लाइनें बोलनी है. एक तो बोलना है कि मेरा पति निर्दोष है, और बोलना है कि ये लोग इन लोगों की चाल है, और ये सब 2-3 चीजें. जब राबड़ी देवी मुख्यमंत्री बनी तो नेक्स्ट कपल ऑफ इयर्स, नेक्स्ट 5 इयर्स में जो सेंटर से स्टेट को फंड आता है, सेंटर से स्टेट को फंड आता है टू बी स्पेंट ऑन डिफरेंट स्कीम्स एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, वो फंड्स वापस चले जाते थे बिहार से, क्योंकि सरकार उसको खर्च ही नहीं कर पाती थी. तो सोचिए एक ऐसा स्टेट जो देश का शायद सबसे पिछड़ा स्टेट है, वहां का स्टेट गवर्नमेंट फंड्स वापस कर दे रहा है क्योंकि लोग खर्च ही नहीं कर पा रहे. तो ये कैसा सोशल जस्टिस है. right? Second, I quote it with numbers. If you had really empowered them, and I would say let's leave कि सारे OBCs दलित्स को हम empower नहीं कर सकते थे, you would have empowered at least your caste, right? Which Lalu used to back very often. अगर सिर्फ आपने अपने कास्ट को ही बैक एम्पावर किया होता तो उनका सोशियो इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस तो बेटर होना चाहिए. अभी अब बिहार में जस्ट कास्ट सेंसस हुआ लास्ट ईयर, इफ यू नो. द यादव्स आर स्टिल बिहाइंड इन टर्म्स ऑफ देयर सोशियो इकोनॉमिक पैरामीटर्स. तो सोचिए 35 years later, अगर 90 से करें, 35 years later, that caste group that you said I am empowering and giving voice to, they're still behind the upper caste in terms of socio-economic parameters. तो ये कैसी आवाज है? फिर इस आवाज को लेके क्या करेंगे? Right? So I find that argument to be very faulty and just a rhetoric of a politician who's trying to come to power.
So 40 minutes is not enough to discuss this topic, and this is very interesting book. And I believe this generation must read this book so that you know how politics of our country changed. And now I open floor for questions. Anyone is having question. In the meantime, I will also share one incident. A very senior journalist in Rajasthan. So I was raised in Rajasthan, born in Bihar, raised in Rajasthan. So when he got to know that I am from Bihar, बोला कि यार आपके यहाँ जो उन्होंने बात की पिछड़ों का आवाज. So he said, लालू प्रसाद यादव ने पिछड़ों का आवाज दिया. So I said कि भैया किडनैपिंग का इंडस्ट्री भी खड़ा किया. So he was continuously नहीं सामाजिक न्याय था, this happened, that happened. And trust me, Rajasthan in terms of Dalit atrocity is worse than UP and Bihar because the population is less. You don't get to know that number, but that is worse than that. So I asked him, sir एक काम करते हैं ना, हमारे यहाँ तो हो गया, अभी आप राजस्थान का सीएम बना लो ना उसको. तो उनका रिस्पॉन्स पता क्या था? मजाक अच्छा करते हैं. So what is the question? Anyone? Yes, sir.
None of these people believe in focusing on education.
So, not a binary answer to that. So, for example, I would not say they would say I do not focus on education, but what is the priority in which they talk about is more important. So, for example, let's look at all the speeches that Lalu would have made in his 90s. In his chief ministerial speeches, in political rallies, 90% of that would be centered around caste. And I don't think he would have spoken about education even once if he had given 100 speeches. So that talks about the priority order in which he takes it. Right? And otherwise he would say, nahi, education hona chahiye. वो अच्छा है. But that must be just a good to have thing. It would not be a necessary thing, I would say. In fact, very interestingly, what he did was, as an education experiment, what he did when he came to power, he established something called Charwaha Vidyalaya. So he said that the kids of, largely as a caste structure, if you see in Bihar and other states as well, Yadavs are the one who largely are into cattle rearing. मतलब गाय और डेयरी और उस सेक्टर में. So he said कि उनके बच्चे जो गाय चराने जाते हैं तो गायें चरती रहेंगी, बच्चे स्कूल में पढ़ते रहेंगे. So that's a good initiative. दोनों काम हो जाएगा. He started with that, but that initiative failed so miserably, and later it became such a butt of jokes that in fact हमारे यहाँ कोई भी अगर किसी सवाल का जवाब कोई बच्चा नहीं दे पाया तो उसे बोलते थे चरवाहा विद्यालय में पढ़ते हो क्या? Because he made it a caste sector scheme and then did not even implement it. He just devised it to show that I'm caring for this caste. Yeah.
Thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights on Bihar. Thank you so much. Small.